My name is Anna Palmer. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Punchbowl News. We are thrilled to have so many of you joining us in person as well as on the live stream this morning for the Summit Access to Care. We're going to be diving deep into issues around healthcare, particularly when it comes to rural health and hospitals and health systems, and the real world impacts that healthcare has and policies have across the country. A big thank you to the Coalition to Strengthen America's Healthcare for making this summit possible. This morning, we're going to kick off the day with a conversation with Senator Peter Welch, the Democrat from Vermont. Afterwards, I'm going to be hosting a fireside chat with Wright Lassiter, CEO of Common Spirit Health. And then I'm going to turn over the stage to our very own Heather Cagle, managing editor of Punchbowl News, and she is going to host a panel conversation to close out the day. After, we'll have some more coffee, networking, food, and encourage you all to stick around after for some of that networking as well. As always, you can find Punchbowl News on all social media channels at Punchbowl News. We encourage you to share this conversation, get the word out there about what we're doing and talking about diving deep into policy issues like this today. And you might have heard we have a new YouTube show, Flyout Day, every Thursday, so encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search YouTube Punchbowl News, and you can just do a click, and you'll be the first to see it every Thursday night. With that, I'm going to welcome Senator Peter Welch to the stage. Thank you so much. All right, Senator, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to go deep on healthcare, but before we do, as all things Punchbowl News, we start with some news of the day, and Congress is always giving us a lot to work with, as we were talking about backstage. Government funding, it's the biggest topic we've been talking about now for weeks, but we are 21 days from a shutdown. Should Democrats accept a clean continuing resolution if it's short term and intended to allow for more time for a bipartisan funding deal, or are you against that?
Well, I'm totally for having us do our job, which is to pass a budget, and we don't do that. So it's all a question of what do we do in a very bad situation. I mean, this serious question, it is absolutely unconscionable that Congress won't pass a budget, and we can get into who did what and who's at fault. But the reality is it's very, very detrimental to the well-being of our country that we don't have annual budgets. And so I'm against that. I'm also against the shutdown. But on the other hand, what we're in right now is a rolling shutdown. When you have essentially the administration, now Russell Vought, doing pocket rescissions, then it really erodes the confidence that both sides need. So how we're going to come out of this remains to be seen, but I think all of us have to step back and take some responsibility for the failure of Congress to do its most basic job. And I think with the administration indicating that it is in favor of this pocket rescission, $5 billion, is a direct frontal assault on the power of Congress. Republicans and Democrats, by the way, had to have the power of spending.
So, okay, fundamentally, obviously, against, you want to have longer-term appropriations bills, not just kind of lurching from government shutdown to government shutdown. But would you support a short-term CR if it's intended for longer negotiations?
That's what we've typically been doing, so I would really pay some significant attention to what Senator Murray and Senator Collins have done. I have a lot of confidence in the two of them, so I know they're negotiating in good faith. So if they made a recommendation, I would be inclined to be supportive of that.
What do you think Democrats need to do? Because go back to March. If we rewind the tape, it was a funding debacle, right? Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer politically really got kind of kicked in the teeth over the fact that the Senate Democrats moved to support that shorter, funding bill. Do you have a clear strategy this time around? It feels like things are still coalescing.
You know, this is Punchbowl at its best, right? Trying to wrangle an answer to an unanswerable question and putting in the context of tactics. Here's the reality, okay? We have 47 votes in the Senate. So we can have whatever strategy we want to have.
Right.
But to be successful with any strategy, you have to have 51 votes or many times 60 votes. That's a reality. So much of what it is we have to do is try to make the case about why what is being done by the administration is worthy for us to oppose. And we have an enormous amount of legitimate pressure from folks we represent to stand up against the president. We're doing the best we can. What we can't guarantee is that we can win when we only have 47 votes. So a lot of our strategy is to fight, is to expose, is to reveal, is to lay out what the implications are. And obviously, the one big beautiful bill that we'll be talking about today is a case in point.
All right, we are going to shift, that's a great segue, our conversation to the topic of the day, healthcare, specifically focusing on patient access to care in rural communities, health systems, the impact that some of the policy changes have had in states like Vermont. So let's set the stage. You're from the state of Vermont. Talk a little bit about what you're hearing. We just spent August back in your home state. What are constituents saying to you, particularly when it comes to rural health care?
Well, people are absolutely terrified about what the implications are when this bill goes fully into effect. Let me just step back for a second. Healthcare is absolutely crucial for the well-being of all of us. Your family, your business, the taxpayers. We have to have it. And that's true whether you're in a red state or a blue state, whether you're Republican or Democrat. There's really three issues with healthcare, none of which are dealt with in the one big beautiful bill. One is the quality of healthcare. I actually think in our country we have pretty good healthcare, if you can get it. Two is access, and three is affordability. And our healthcare costs have been rising way faster than inflation, way faster than wages. And it's putting enormous pressure on everybody who's paying premiums, and it's putting enormous pressure on taxpayers with the Medicaid and Medicare programs. The access issue is made worse by the One Big Beautiful Bill, and the cost side is made worse by the One Big Beautiful Bill, and it really hammers rural areas. So let me get specific on it. In Vermont, 45,000 folks depend on Medicaid. I was checking on North Dakota.
My home state.
105,000 people. And in your state, 67% of the people who are in nursing homes, that's funded by Medicaid. Families who have a disabled child, Medicaid is absolutely the lifeline. And that's true in North Dakota, a Republican state. It's true in Vermont, a Democratic state. And the heartbreak for me in this discussion and debate about health care is that we get into this partisan battle about spending or about access, but we don't deal with a solution that's going to be good for folks in Heather's or Anna's North Dakota or Peter's Vermont. So this is brutal, and the hammer is coming down once these cuts go into place, because what happens in both states, all states, is once that person no longer has health care, 45,000 in my state, 105,000 in your state, they still have health care problems. And they show up at our rural hospitals. And our rural hospitals are all operating on the thinnest of margins. And those hospitals will open the doors when somebody comes in. They just won't get paid. And at a certain point, they can't stay in existence.
And then potentially that they can't stay open, right?
So rural America, that's exactly right. So rural America is in great jeopardy as a result of this. And you're going to see legislators who voted for this having to make a decision, because they're going to be hearing from their constituents, just like I am, what's happening to our local hospital. So this is extremely threatening to the well-being of rural health care and access to health care.
So I want to get into a little bit of kind of when that impact's going to be felt, because we've had conversations. We had a conversation last year on rural health, and I think a lot of health systems were already struggling, right? We're already trying to find ways to figure out how to pay the bills to make sure that they, whether they had to be part of bigger systems or figure that out. But when will the impact of this be felt? Is it already being felt, or is there preparation happening?
Yeah, there's two things. Number one, for the people who have Medicaid, that won't be, they won't feel that directly until after the next election. Funny that the timing was changed so that the cuts wouldn't actually happen until after the midterms. On the other hand, all the hospital administrators, and I guess you're going to have some folks from the hospitals here after, they're seeing over the horizon, and they're having to make adjustments already, and they're cutting in some cases in anticipation of the revenue decline that they're going to face. So you're going to see the pressure on the hospitals right away. Now, where there's going to be an immediate impact is on the affordable care subsidies, the Obamacare subsidies. That is going to be immediate and absolutely brutal. Let me give an example. In Vermont, if you're a family with an income of $110,000, family of four, and in Vermont that's a good income, but it's still, our expenses are really high, your premiums are going to go from $7,000 to $30,000. All hell is going to break loose when that happens. So that impact is going to be felt immediately.
Do you think that's something that Democrats should be using? We've been writing a ton about this over the last several weeks, right? That the healthcare insurance premiums are one of those big issues, are one of those areas where some Republican senators have also acknowledged concerns that this could be a big problem for them when it's November, it's December, and those rate notices go out. Is this something that you think will get included potentially in this government funding package?
Well, it should. I mean, we just can't do that to families, whether in North Dakota or in Vermont or even, in Texas. You just can't do that to them. And it's not the fault of the family that Congress and the whole medical establishment hasn't dealt with reforms that are necessary to reduce premium pressure. Those families got kids, they've got parents, they've got illnesses, and they've got to get access to health care. So, I think my Republican colleagues, they're dealing with the same thing I am, okay? So we put it in partisan terms a lot of times, but the universality of what the folks all of us represent have with respect to wanting to get health care when their family needs it is really, really urgent.
I want to go, because this is oftentimes, Punchbowl News is always very focused on what's happening in Congress on Capitol Hill. But you were the Vermont Senate Pro Tem. What insights can you share about that state-level budgeting when it comes to health care and some of the challenges when maybe what's happening at the federal level impacts these states so greatly?
Well, there was an article in the Times the other day about what the incredible burden will be on states. And the states, of course, have no fiscal capacity. All the states, Vermont, interestingly enough, is not in this category. We constitutionally have to balance their budget. So what you're going to see with all states, like take the One Big Beautiful Bill, the nutrition programs have been cut very, very significantly. And we'll lose thousands of families being able to get that $6 a day that makes a difference in their being able to feed. There'll be enormous pressure from my colleagues in Vermont for Vermont to fill the void. We have high taxes in Vermont already. We don't have the cash, all right? We have a drought right now. And we've seen discussions about getting FEMA out of any kind of rescue relief. We've had floods in Vermont. Vermonters want to come to the aid. We don't have the funds to be able to do that. So you're going to see over and over again, and healthcare is another example. We're very proud of the efforts we've made in Vermont with Medicaid expansion to make access to healthcare available to people. That is not unique to Vermont, okay? And this pressure will be immense on states, but Vermont has no fiscal capacity to be able to fill in for the huge hole that occurs when you cut nutrition benefits in healthcare like what's happening right now.
Is it a messaging problem? In some ways, each state has their own name for Medicaid expansion. The Badger State program, different programs that are happening across the states. So it doesn't, while they're going to be felt, at a state-by-state level, do you feel like Democrats have been able to adequately message when it comes to this challenge and what people can expect?
Well, who thinks the Democrats are doing anything good about messaging? All right.
Got a lot of honesty up here this morning. I appreciate that.
But having said that, this is much more than a messaging problem. This is like a real problem, okay? You're an employer. You care about your employees. One of the things you know they need is health care. You get employer-sponsored health care. You open the mail, you got a 20% increase. You've done everything you can for workplace safety. You've done everything you can maybe for on-site medical attention. You get a 20% increase. What do? You can't raise the prices, and you've got tariffs now to deal with, but you want to keep your employees. Well, what that means is you have a discussion about, do you want me to continue paying the premiums, or do you want to get a better raise? That's happening across America. So this is, it is messaging, but it's much deeper than that. And that's what frustrates me in Congress, because the challenges that we face are universal on the question of health care. It's not like it's a Republican type of problem or a Democratic problem. And traditionally what has happened, and I've seen this over and over again here, is the Democrats will primarily focus on access, and the Republicans will focus on cost. But their answer to cutting the cost of health care is to take away people's health care insurance, Medicaid, and even, by the way, Medicare is threatened if we have this kind of deficit. And the reality is, and this is something we did when I was in the Senate, when I was Senate President, we had a Republican governor. We had a big fight about health care, and Governor Douglas was arguing about cost. I was arguing about access, and finally we threw up our hands and said, hey, we're both right, and we came up with legislation that actually addressed some of his cost concerns that then allowed us to have more access. We are not in that place here yet, okay? And to the extent that we're always focusing on who's got the partisan edge on the messaging, we're not facing what the structural problems are that are beyond the control of individuals or even our community hospitals. They have a tight budget, but if they keep getting hammered, the higher prescription drug prices, higher medical device costs, then we're not able to give the services to the people that need it.
So let's shift gears a little bit. CMS Rural Health Fund. There's been a lot of discussion about whether that's going to be short term. Is the funding at the level that is actually needed to create the level of care? What's your take on the CMS Rural Health Fund?
It's totally absurd. Okay, you put in $50 billion, and that's all about walking around money for the Republicans whose votes were needed by the president, and you convince them that they're going home heroes because they've got this special fund, and you've just cut $1 trillion from Medicaid. So 50 billion, 1 trillion. So this is nothing but political. That's all it is. It was vote buying money. That's what it was. So we don't know how that money will be allocated, but what we do know is the hit financially to Medicaid is so much greater than that $50 billion quote fund. So that's magical thinking and political deception.
So, and it's short term, right? So, I mean, you look at what's happening with the Obamacare subsidies right now. I mean, they're going to have to probably go back to the well and find more funding, is what you're saying, right?
That's right. No, I am.
And how worried are you that a state like Vermont that isn't Republican is going to potentially have a problem with that? Like, being able to get access to those funds?
Oh, no, look, let's be real here. You have a special fund, half of it totally controlled by the president. How many, raise your hand, I'm not going to make you do that, but how many think that might end up in red states? Okay? Well, you're all right. So this actually is very frustrating to me, because talking about that $50 billion as a serious response to cutting health care by $1 trillion is just absolutely absurd. And, there's a tendency when we're on these tight votes, and of course this bill passed in the Senate by a single vote, and that was Vice President, right? And in those clinches, and you know this better than anybody because you guys are always checking who's getting what, and you're usually right, and somebody's getting something, and it's all about just getting to that 51st vote, in this case in the Senate. It's not about a structural remedy for a structural problem. So this is, in my view, bogus.
So we've identified, kind of where the problem lies, the struggle that rural health and rural hospitals and health systems are facing right now. It's September 9th. We have, a few months before the end of the year. Do you have any hope that there's going to be some relief that's going to come before then? Is there either in this government funding package, in an extenders package? What might that look like?
No, I do. On the Obamacare subsidies, I do, because I just gave you that example. Can you imagine being a family? You've got a teacher and you've got a firefighter, right? And they're making $100,000 or more, and their premium is going to go from $7,000 to $30,000. Okay, I mean, you can talk to Ted Cruz about that. He's going to be freaked out. You can talk to Peter Welch. I am freaked out, all right? And that's literally what is awaiting us. So that pressure is coming to bear. And you saw it with your interview with Speaker Johnson. They, quote, don't like the policy, but he acknowledged that they don't want to have that kind of disruption for families in Louisiana or families in Vermont. So I think the pressure on us to do something to shield folks against that kind of shock is great, and hopefully will allow us to come up with at least a short-term remedy.
I mean, Senator Majority Leader John Thune has said Democrats need to come up with a solution and bring it to them as part of this.
Well, that's the Washington blame game in advance, right? Anticipatory blame. The reality is we got a problem, and we've got to solve it. You know, the Obamacare has become very popular because it's made it possible for folks to afford access to health care. And, you know, I was in the House when we passed that, and then I was in the House when we tried to repeal it, like, 80 times. And the epithet was Obamacare, and now Obamacare is seen as a good thing. So whoever it is that, you know, did we cause the problem by giving America something that they desperately needed? Well, I'll take the blame for that. All right, I'm glad to have voted for Obamacare. But now we got to keep it because it's helping folks in South Dakota, in North Dakota, in Vermont, all around. I do believe, and I am a hawk on this, we have got to deal with the structural cost challenges in healthcare. And we should be working on that together. And I work with folks like Josh Hawley. I work with Senator Grassley on trying to deal with one element of that, and that's the incredibly high prescription drug prices that we pay. And this is an area, by the way, where President Trump has talked about most favored nation pricing. We shouldn't be suckers in the U.S. and pay 5-6 times for the same drug that in Canada or Great Britain or France folks there pay. I'm for doing that and other things that help bring down the cost of health care.
All right, we are going to quickly run out of time, but I want to get to a couple more things. And I want to zoom out a bit. I mean, we've kind of talked a lot about what's happening now in Congress, kind of the overall issues, but rural hospitals and providers are not only dealing with the current legislative landscape. I mean, if you look back over the last couple of years, I mean, there's been COVID, the opioid crisis, additional pressures that have impacted these hospitals that often are providing mental health, services, all kinds of services that even 10, 20 years ago were not on in their purview. What more can the federal government do? Are there policies that you think, it might not be before the end of the year, but in the next year or two that could be helpful?
Well, first of all, in the context of passing this one big beautiful bill and taking $1 trillion out, job one, repeal that. That is a disaster, and it's going to unfold quickly and accelerate. You just can't take that money out of the system without forcing hospitals to close and people to go without health care. So tinkering around here and there when what we've done is just taking a howitzer to the healthcare system, that thing's got to go. We ought to repeal it. That's my view. I don't see the piecemeal. On the opioid, by the way, this is the heartbreak for me. In the Energy and Commerce, when I was in the House, Diana DeGette and Fred, what was from Michigan?
Oh, Upton.
Yeah. Oh my God! Don't tell people I forgot his name because he's a really good friend. So we're going to keep that part on the down low, okay? But they worked together, and we got the Cures Act. And it was bipartisan, and it was bipartisan because all of us were horrified at the suffering from the opioid crisis that was afflicting our families and people in our community. And Upton and DeGette worked together and got this bill. And there was a lot of celebration, and rightly so, because it was about solving a problem that was affecting folks in all of our districts. We're seeing that funding diminish enormously. And for the last 3 years, the opioid numbers have been going in the right direction. And some of that was because there was bipartisan funding for treatment. That's getting taken away. And I'm really fearful as a result of that, you're going to see those opioid numbers going back up. So, this is, again, I'm repeating myself, but these challenges that we face in our country, the quality of education, the impact of social media on the mental health and well-being of our children, the
the precarious state of healthcare in our community hospitals. They're so essential to the well-being of rural community life. Those are shared challenges, Republicans and Democrats. And it's not something we should be looking for, those of us in Congress, to get some, quote, partisan advantage of. We should be looking at those like Fred and Diana did, where they passed the Cures Act to solve a problem that helps your community and my community. So we're stuck in this sort of partisan battle back and forth, and we've got shared problems that all of us need to focus on. It's why I continue to try to seek in a very partisan world a bipartisan approach, because what I've experienced in politics is that enduring accomplishments have to ultimately be bipartisan.
So we're going to close on that, because I think, you know, having some optimism is always important in a town where there's a lot of partisanship. But as you mentioned, I mean, kind of a couple times, this is not a liberal or a conservative state, right? I mean, especially when it comes to rural hospitals and rural health. I mean, this impacts people of all parties. Right. Are you having any productive conversations with colleagues on the other side? Is there some kind of a shining light or something that we can end on a high note here?
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to my colleagues, I'll talk to Senator Grassley or Senator Hawley, and I'll ask them, how are the community hospitals? When we have a conversation about that, it's a shared conversation, because the problems we're facing in Vermont are similar to what they're facing, and I can do that with Senator Cruz. Then the system a little bit gets in our way, where we go into our corners and we have these big fights at the level of, we're going to shut government down or not. And obviously we should not be shutting government down, but we should be having some capacity to work together. And there's a lot of members in the Senate. And I have an immense amount of respect for my colleagues on both sides of the aisle in the Senate. There's some exceptions, but we'll keep that on the down low too. But
that's for later.
Yeah, that's for later. But the hope I have is that all of us who get elected do, by and large, feel better at the end of the day if we can say we've done something to help the people we represent. And what I've seen is that the people we represent, whether we're Republican or Democrat, have shared problems. Better education, housing, access to health care. So if we remember that, then it's going to give us allegiance to one another in that common effort to make an improved situation, as opposed to loyalty to a president of our party or loyalty to just our party, but the common goal that we have of helping our time here in Congress be productive to help the people we represent.
All right, Senator Welch, we are going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.